Hi, folks. I wanted to talk a little bit about Discordian 5-act dramatic structure. So, the 5-act structure is relatively well known. It's not as common as the 3-act structure, but it does come up quite a bit. Many times we don't have a proper explanation for how 5-act structure works. We instead take a 3-act system and then we stretch out the central act to span 3 gaps of time, and that is our 5-act structure. But we can do a little bit better if we embrace some Discordian concepts. The Discordian calendar cuts up the seasons into 5 pieces: chaos, discord, confusion, bureaucracy, and the aftermath. Each of these has a distinct emotional environment, and going through each of these stages results in a narrative, a story that has many pieces that hook together. The first act, Chaos, is for introducing our protagonists. It's for introducing the setting as well. It helps us get oriented in the world where the story takes place. You can think of the protagonist as just another character, but who happens to have the camera sitting over their shoulder, or who happens to have the narrator narrating their internal monologue. That isn't a special privilege within the world. It's a special privilege for us who are consuming the media. In the next act, Discord, we are introduced to antagonists, or at least we're introduced to characters who morally oppose the characters that we're initially introduced to. And this juxtaposition creates a moral conflict, which is meant to orient the viewer within the environment, right? Following that, we have the stuff that people usually like to talk about. There's confusion. Confusion is the third act, and it's also where the protagonists get to perform the bulk of their duties, or they get to exercise their choices. Confusion is when the protagonists are at their most powerful, and it's when they get to change the world in ways that they want. This leads to bureaucracy, the fourth act. In bureaucracy, the antagonist becomes even more powerful and demonstrates that they are truly a villain, or perhaps they summon a villain. Either way, the villain is revealed during bureaucracy, and this true face reveal usually corresponds to what's known as the third act twist in more traditional 3-act analysis. Finally, we have the aftermath, which is an entire act where the protagonists and the antagonists figure out their differences and resolve them. The audience does not have to understand the resolution. It just has to be one where the antagonists and protagonists are reasonably satisfied. And I think that that's it, really. There are 5 acts. The reason that this is interesting is because we can take stories that traditionally have a very weak analysis and we can make them much stronger. For example, we can read The Christmas Carol, which is a traditional 5-act story, 2 ways. We can either read it as one act, a really big second act, and a third act, right? The 3 ghosts in the middle create this big, bulky second act. But we could also chop it up into 5 acts, and if we do that, then we get the structure that I've just explained. We initially are introduced to Scrooge as an anti-hero protagonist, and then he is antagonized by anti-villains. After that, then during confusion, first Scrooge has his main awakenings and understandings, and he gets to express his part. But then during bureaucracy, the spirits get to point out that time is inevitable and Scrooge doesn't have control over everything in his world. Finally, in the aftermath, Scrooge comes to terms with the finite, limited existence that he has, and decides to change how he is morally oriented in order to satisfy himself. So that's Discordian 5-act in a nutshell. I know that many more examples are required in order to make this analysis feel comfortable, but at the very least, it is a template for building stories that don't have antagonists or protagonists, but that do have a setting. And this allows people to explore the setting without necessarily committing to saying that a protagonist is good